They say the house chooses who it loves and who it devours. When 16-year-old Elara is forced to live with the father who abandoned her, she enters a world of whispered elegance and deadly secrets. Her stepsister Seraphine is everything Elara is not: beautiful, beloved, and hiding a cruelty as sharp as thorns. But when Elara discovers her late mother's hidden journal and a legacy meant to be hers, the game of silk and poison begins. In a house where charm can kill and bloodlines carry more than just name, Elara must uncover the truth before she becomes the next ghost in the garden. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The carriage wheels ground to a slow halt on the gravel path, stones crunching beneath their weight like brittle bones. Elara sat stiffly on the worn velvet seat, hands clenched around the frayed handle of her only suitcase. Outside the window, the estate rose from the mist like a sleeping beast, tall, gray-stoned, and overgrown with ivy. It was beautiful in the way a thunderstorm is beautiful, wild, ominous, and impossible to ignore. A manservant opened the door without a word. Elara stepped out, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The air smelled of damp roses and distant smoke. Her heart beat an uneven rhythm beneath her traveling cloak. She hadn't seen her father in 10 years, not since he'd walked out of the cottage after her mother told him to leave. Now her mother was dead, her cottage sold, and her fate tied to this unfamiliar place and the strangers inside it. The front door swung open with a theatrical groan, and there she stood, Lady Calisandra, tall and polished like a carved statue, her gown the color of wine and her smile as brittle as porcelain. "You must be Elara," she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced, like the rustle of expensive silk. "How quaint." Elara nodded mutely, clutching her suitcase tighter. From behind her stepmother emerged a girl about her age, wrapped in cascading silk, her golden hair coiled in perfect spirals. She moved like a swan, graceful and slow, every glance measured. Her name was Seraphine, and her eyes were the soft blue of the sky before a storm. "How lovely," Seraphine said, her lips curved in a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "A country girl in our halls. You must tell me what mud smells like. I've always been curious." Elara blinked, unsure if it was a joke. Her silence was met with a low, musical laugh. "Come," Lady Calisandra said, already turning. "Let's not keep the past lingering on the doorstep." They led her through the halls, paintings of dead ancestors glaring down at her, chandeliers that clinked faintly like whispering teeth. The estate was colder than it should have been, despite the marble fireplaces. Servants watched from the corners, their expressions unreadable. Her room was at the far end of the east wing, past a long corridor with no carpet and no windows. The door creaked open to reveal a small chamber with a narrow bed, a cracked mirror, and a wardrobe that smelled faintly of cedar and mildew. It was colder than the rest of the house. Dust veiled the shelves. No fire had been lit. "We thought you might prefer something simple," Seraphine said sweetly, stepping just inside the threshold. "We didn't want to overwhelm you." Elara didn't respond. She dropped her suitcase by the bed and turned to face her stepsister fully. Seraphine's smile remained, but her eyes had sharpened. They glittered with something that wasn't kindness. "Welcome home," she said. Then she turned, her silk dress hissing softly across the wooden floor, and vanished into the gloom of the corridor, leaving Elara alone with the cold, the dust, and the creeping certainty that nothing in this house was what it seemed. The estate had many rooms, but only a few were ever open to Elara. Breakfast was served precisely at 8 in the glass-walled conservatory, where vines crawled over panes and filtered light dappled the white linen tablecloth. Lady Calisandra sat upright each morning with a newspaper she never read, and Seraphine sipped her tea as though each drop whispered secrets to her. Elara, in a borrowed dress 2 inches too short, learned to take up as little space as possible. "I heard you used to keep chickens," Seraphine said one morning, stirring her tea with a deliberate grace. "How rustic. I imagine they must have been like sisters to you." Lady Calisandra chuckled softly without looking up. Elara didn't respond. She reached for the jam pot and knocked over her teacup. The crash echoed through the conservatory like a gunshot. Oh dear, Seraphine sighed. How clumsy. Within moments, a servant swept in and whisked away the mess. Elara's cheeks burned as Lady Calisandra calmly folded her paper. Perhaps, she said, you might observe rather than participate until you've reacclimated. Later that day, her embroidery needles vanished. A week after that, a letter she'd begun writing to an old friend was found half-burned in the hearth. And one night, she woke to find all the books she'd borrowed from the library, those few she was allowed, stacked outside her door, their pages torn and stained with ink. She said nothing, because every time she opened her mouth, Seraphine was ready, with a look of wide-eyed innocence, a tilted head, a clever lie. Oh, I saw her with the letter, but she said she was going to throw it away. I found the books like that. Honestly, Elara, how careless of you. She must be confused. She hasn't been well since the funeral, you know. And they believed her. Of course they did. She was beautiful, well-spoken, radiant in every way. And Elara, plain, quiet, grief-worn Elara, had no one who would take her side. One afternoon, seeking refuge, Elara found herself wandering the tangled paths of the overgrown gardens behind the estate. Amidst curling ferns and strangled rose bushes, she found a locked greenhouse, its glass panels fogged with years of silence. Something about it tugged at her. She pressed her hand to the door, and though it didn't budge, she could almost hear a whisper inside. That night, she dreamt of her mother's voice. Not words, just the warmth of it, like a lullaby across a winter wind. The next morning, Seraphine passed her in the hallway, her smile lazy and confident. You look pale, stepsister, she purred. Are the walls starting to close in? And for the first time, Elara met her gaze without flinching. They're not closing in, she said. They're watching. Seraphine paused, only for a breath. Then she laughed, soft and cruel, like wind in dead leaves, and continued on her way. But her eyes lingered a moment too long. And Elara knew then. Her wicked stepsister saw her not just as a guest, but as a threat. Rain had fallen the night before, and the garden steamed gently in the pale morning light, as though the earth itself was exhaling. Elara wandered further than she meant to, past the crumbling sundial and the empty birdbath that moss had claimed long ago. Her shoes squelched in the damp grass as she made her way back toward the greenhouse, the locked one, half swallowed by thorn and vine. Something about it whispered of forgotten things. She approached the door again, running her fingers along the rusted iron frame. To her surprise, a section of vine had shifted with the rain, revealing a hairline crack in the glass panel near the base. She crouched and pressed lightly. The pane gave way with a soft creak, sliding out enough for her to reach through. The latch clicked. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old earth and wilted petals. Shafts of light broke through the grime-covered glass above, illuminating clusters of withered orchids, dry soil, and cracked pots. It looked long abandoned, yet strangely undisturbed. She stepped carefully, the floorboards moaning underfoot. Toward the back, beneath a warped workbench, she noticed something wedged into a narrow crevice in the wall. A small, leather-bound journal wrapped in faded blue ribbon. Her heart thudded. The initials on the cover were hers. But not hers alone. E.C. Elara Calverley. Her mother. The pages inside were brittle but legible. At first, it was just musings, garden notes, pressed petals, careful sketches of roses in various stages of bloom. But as she flipped further, the tone shifted. I feel watched. Seraphine smiles too often. Calisandra calls it charm. I see hunger. Something in the tea tasted wrong today. I didn't drink it. Elara froze, her breath misting over the fragile page. My husband won't listen. He says I'm imagining things. But he doesn't see the way Calisandra looks at me when he isn't watching. If anything happens to me, tell Elara. She must know the truth. My darling girl. Be careful. Elara's fingers tightened around the journal. Her hands shook. The greenhouse suddenly felt colder, the silence thicker. Behind her, a sharp noise cracked the stillness, like a twig snapping beneath a boot. She turned fast, journal clutched to her chest. No one there. But when she stepped outside, the damp path behind her bore a single, fresh footprint. Small, elegant, and unmistakably shaped like the heel of Seraphine's favorite lavender slippers. The estate's annual midsummer ball was an affair of velvet, lace, and polished smiles. It had once been hosted by Elara's mother and father, when laughter still echoed through these halls. Now it belonged to Lady Calisandra, and every corner reeked of curated luxury. Perfumed guests with practiced laughs, candlelight softened by rose-colored glass, and music sweet enough to make lies sound like compliments. Elara stood near the edge of the ballroom, half hidden behind a marble pillar, watching Seraphine whirl like a vision across the floor. Her silver gown shimmered with each step, her hair bound in a jeweled net, her laughter trailing behind her like perfume. She was the kind of girl fairy tales were written about. And Elara was the forgotten one again. She wore a simple gown Lady Calisandra had graciously allowed her to borrow, one shade too dull, one season too late. Still, she had something Seraphine didn't know about. The journal, now hidden safely beneath a loose floorboard in her room. And knowledge, even if half-formed, was power. "Elara, isn't it?" a voice said beside her. She turned. A tall man stood in a dark coat trimmed with green velvet. Sharp cheekbones. Curious eyes. A crescent-shaped scar near his temple. "I'm Lord Thorn," he said. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else." Elara gave a tight smile. "How observant of you." He chuckled. "I'm known for it." They spoke quietly for a time, of gardens, of books, of cities beyond the hills. He didn't look at her like she was background noise. He looked like he was listening, which was, of course, why Seraphine appeared beside them soon after, all sugar and moonlight. "Oh, Elara," she said with mock surprise. "I didn't realize you knew Lord Thorn." "We just met," Elara replied, eyes steady. Seraphine's gaze flicked to Thorn and back. Her smile curled just slightly tighter. "How charming. You've met the quiet one," she said to him. "Did she tell you about the time she knocked over a vase and blamed a maid? Quite the imagination. But then she always has been dramatic." Elara flinched. The lie landed like a slap. She opened her mouth to respond, but Thorn's voice cut in, calm and cool. "I think I prefer drama over performance," he said. Seraphine blinked. Her lashes fluttered. For the first time, her smile faltered, not gone, but thinned at the edges. "Well," she said slowly, "not everyone appreciates refinement." She turned with a graceful swish of silk and drifted away, but not before Elara caught it, just for a moment. The sharp twist of her lips, the venom in her narrowed eyes. The mask had cracked. Later that night, as the music dwindled and the guests retreated to their carriages, Elara returned to her room to find something new waiting for her. On her pillow lay a single red rose. Its petals had been dipped in black ink, and beneath it, a folded scrap of parchment in Seraphine's hand. Even roses rot eventually. The next morning, Elara awoke with the rose still lying on her nightstand like a threat that had bloomed in the dark. She didn't flinch anymore. Seraphine's games no longer frightened her, they focused her. The diary had led her this far. Now it was time to look beyond her mother's words, into her father's silence. She found him in the study, surrounded by dust and books he barely read. A brandy glass sat untouched by his elbow. He looked older than she remembered, not in years, but in posture. Hollowed out. "You were at the ball last night," he said without looking up. "You looked like her." "My mother," Elara said quietly. He nodded once. There was a silence then. Not cold, just exhausted. She moved closer, holding the journal like a holy thing. "Why didn't you stop them?" That made him look up. He studied her, his expression unreadable. Then his voice dropped, barely a whisper. "Because I didn't believe it. Or maybe I didn't want to." He took the journal from her hands and turned the pages slowly, as if touching something sacred and painful. "She told me Seraphine had a cruel streak. I thought she was jealous. Calisandra had a way of making anyone seem paranoid." Elara hesitated. "Then, she was poisoned, wasn't she?" His jaw clenched. "The doctor said it was illness. A wasting disease. But yes, your mother suspected something. Said her tea tasted wrong." I laughed. I told her she was imagining things. When she died, I thought it was grief and guilt. So I married Calisandra. To keep you safe. "Safe?" Elara echoed. "From what?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The next day, while Lady Calisandra rode into the village and Seraphine disappeared into one of her restful walks, Elara returned to the family archives. A vaulted room at the back of the house filled with parchment, ledgers, and brittle scrolls. She searched for hours before she found what she was looking for. The will. Her grandfather's. the man who had built this estate from nothing. And there, written in sharp black ink on yellowed paper, in the event of his death, Frederick Calverley's holdings and lands shall pass to his heir of direct blood, and that heir's firstborn child. Not the wife, not the stepchild. The bloodline passed through Elara. Seraphine had always known. That was why she hated her. She wasn't a rival. She was an obstacle. Later that evening, Elara passed Seraphine in the hall. They paused like chess pieces mid-play. Seraphine's gaze flicked to the satchel Elara carried, the corner of a document just visible. "You've been reading things that don't belong to you," she said smoothly. Elara didn't flinch. "They do belong to me. That's the point." Seraphine's expression barely changed, but something sharp glittered behind her perfect smile. "Well then," she murmured, voice like the hush before a storm. "I suppose we'll see what else you think you deserve." Then she walked on, the perfume of lilies and danger trailing behind her. The storm came that night. Not rain, not wind, but fury in velvet gloves. The estate fell into an uneasy hush as the air thickened with something electric. Elara waited in her room, the old journal tucked beneath her pillow, the will sealed in her satchel. Every candle flickered with unease. She had sent a letter to the estate council that morning, complete with a copy of the will. Her father hadn't stopped her. He hadn't offered help either, but his silence had shifted. He was no longer blind, just afraid. Footsteps outside her door. Slow, certain. Seraphine didn't knock. She didn't need to. She entered like she owned the house, her pale gown flowing behind her like a tide of silk and menace. "I warned you," she said calmly. "But I suppose some girls never learn to stay in the shadows." Elara stood slowly, heart pounding but gaze steady. "Is that what happened to my mother?" She stepped out of the shadows. Seraphine blinked, then smiled. Wide, empty, perfect. She started asking questions. She thought her love would protect her. She even thought father would choose her over us. But men are easily distracted. "You poisoned her," Elara said, her voice low. Seraphine tilted her head. "Not directly. Mother handled the details. A tincture here, a different tea blend there. Nothing drastic. Slow. Elegant. Like pruning a dying flower. You killed her." "No," Seraphine whispered. "She just stopped belonging." Elara moved toward the bed and pulled the journal from beneath her pillow, then the will from her satchel. She set them both on the table between them like weapons in a duel. "I've already sent copies. They know. The estate council, the solicitor. You've lost." For the first time, Seraphine's mask faltered. Not fully, but a crack shimmered in her perfect composure. Her lips parted, her breath caught. "You think they'll believe you? A stray girl from the cottage woods? I've been here for 10 years. I've poured wine for every guest, cried at every funeral, smiled through every speech." "You've worn your lies like silk," Elara said. "But they're unraveling." A long silence. Then Seraphine laughed, softly, a choking sort of sound, like something rusted breaking loose. "You have no idea what I've done to stay in this house," she said. "You think I'm wicked? You haven't even seen wicked. I was raised by a woman who taught me that love is leverage and silence is survival." Elara's voice dropped. "Then maybe it's time someone taught you about consequences." Seraphine stepped closer. "You're not strong enough." "I don't have to be," Elara replied. "The truth is." And for a moment, just a breath, Seraphine looked afraid. Not of Elara, of losing. Then she turned, slow and stiff, and walked out the door without another word. By dawn, the estate council had arrived. They didn't knock either. They arrived in dark coats and silence. 3 members of the Calverley Estate Council, each older than the stone pats outside, and twice as hard to impress. Elara stood in the drawing room, her fingers tight around the will. Her father sat nearby, shoulders hunched like a man waiting for a verdict he already suspected. Lady Calisandra descended the stairs with her usual grandeur, smiling like a serpent in lace. Seraphine followed, dressed immaculately, not a hair out of place, but her eyes were different now. The calculation remained, but the certainty was gone. She was fighting to keep the edges of her world from unraveling. The council took their seats. No small talk. No greetings. The eldest, Lord Braywick, opened the folded document. He spoke in a voice that had weathered decades of lies and still knew how to spot one. "This is your claim, Miss Elara Calverley?" "It is," she answered, steady. "My mother was Frederick Calverley's daughter. I am his only living blood heir. The will was hidden. I found it, along with evidence that—" she paused, then glanced at Seraphine. "That not everything in this house is as it seems." They listened. They read. They asked questions. When it came time for Seraphine to speak, she rose with that same perfect grace, but her voice trembled ever so slightly. "This girl," she said, "was raised in the woods by a bitter woman who resented our family. She is digging up ghosts because she has nothing else." Her voice was sweet, but the venom was thinner now, diluted by fear. Lord Braywick held up the journal. "And how do you explain this?" Written in Lady Calverley's own hand. Lady Calisandra's face, untouched until now, flickered. A forgery. Sentimental nonsense. But they were already turning toward Elara again. "You will remain here," Lord Braywick said, "until this matter is formally resolved. Lady Calisandra and Miss Seraphine, you will leave the estate by sunset. Effective immediately." There was no scream. No curse. Only silence. Seraphine's mask finally cracked, a tremor in her lip, a tremble in her chin. She turned to Elara slowly, eyes dark and gleaming with something close to hatred. "This was never meant to be yours." Elara met her stare without blinking. "That's what makes it mine." Lady Calisandra said nothing as she left. She did not look back. Seraphine was the last to step into the waiting carriage. Just before the door closed, she leaned out and said, almost too softly to hear, "You think this house will love you? It will rot you the way it did us." The door slammed shut, and they were gone. That night, Elara walked the halls alone, the echoes no longer watching, only listening. The estate was hers now, not in title alone, but in presence. She made her way to the greenhouse, unlocked the door, and stepped into the soil her mother once walked. The air smelled of dust and renewal. A single rosebush had begun to bloom again. She knelt, pressing her fingers into the earth. "I'm home," she whispered. And this time, the house didn't resist. It listened. Weeks passed. The storm had ended, but its scent still lingered, a clean, bitter perfume of endings and rebirth. Elara stood in the garden at dawn, barefoot, her fingers stained with soil and rose thorns. The greenhouse behind her had been cleared of rot, its cracked glass replaced. New seedlings took root where shadows once crept. This was her ritual now. No grand dinners, no social preening. Just quiet tending, to plants, to memory, to something fragile and fierce growing inside her. She hadn't yet moved into the master chambers. The east wing remained hers. The small room, the worn mirror. She kept them not from sentiment, but out of respect for what she had survived there. Every scar had value. Lord Thorne visited from time to time. Not with roses, not with declarations. He brought books or news from the village, or just silence that didn't feel empty. They never spoke of Seraphine. There was nothing more to say. The council finalized her inheritance by early autumn. Word spread slowly. Curious neighbors arrived with two sweet smiles, eager to befriend the girl who conquered the house. Elara met them with soft civility but steel beneath it. She knew now that charm could be a blade. And still she dreamed of her mother. Not as a ghost, but as a presence in the garden breeze, in the way the sunlight touched certain petals, in the soft whisper of pages turning on her desk. One afternoon, while restoring an old fountain near the hedge maze, Elara found something buried beneath the mossy basin. A carved wooden locket, sealed tight with age. Inside was a pressed bluebell, delicate as memory. A note, folded and faded, rested behind it. For the girl who finds her way through thorns. You are stronger than I ever dared to be. Elara wept then. Not because she was sad or lost or afraid, but because she was seen. For the first time in years, the estate bloomed. It wasn't perfect. Some wounds don't close. Some ghosts don't fade. But the poison was gone. The garden was hers. The house was hers. And she, Elara Calverley, was no longer the forgotten girl in the shadows. She was the one who survived the wicked and planted something better in its place.